One of the examples of saturated acid, we have lauric, mesteric, palmitic acid. Okay, actually this examples is a common saturated fatty acid. And when we say lauric acid, this is actually a saturated acid with a 12 carbon atom chain, thus having many properties of medium chain fatty acid. It is a bright white powdery solid with a faint odor of bay oil or soap. That is lauric acid. When we say mesteric acid, it is actually salts and esters are commonly referred to as meristates. Okay, so meristic acid is soluble in water. Okay, it said that when meristic acid and lauric acid, they are both white solid but very slightly soluble in water. We cannot actually conclude that meristic acid is soluble in water as a whole. It is slightly soluble in water. Another common saturated acid, we have palmitic acid. Sorry. Okay. Palmitic acid is actually a common saturated fatty acid that is postulated to have antithrombotic effects which can help prevent stroke. So that is one common saturated fatty acid. It is a postulated to have an antithrombotic effects which can help to prevent stroke. So that is the definition or the function of palmitic acid. Okay, as you can see, take a look with this slide share. We have saturated fatty acid and unsaturated fatty acid. As you can see in this slide share, the saturated fatty acid as a single bond only, straight single bond. Comparing it to unsaturated acid, as you can see the differences with it. Saturated as a straight single bond and unsaturated fatty acid as a double bond. Okay, and aside from that, as you can see with the chain, it has a hydrocarbon structure. When we say hydrocarbon structure, carbon attached to another carbon, or carbon is attached to a hydrogen bond. Okay, next we are now done discussing saturated fatty acid. Let's now continue our discussion with unsaturated fatty acid. When we say unsaturated fatty acid, these are fatty acid contain one or more double bonds along the length of the hydrocarbon chain. As you can see with the structure of it, the middle of the attach of the carbon to carbon to hydrogen bond has a double bond, so that will make as an unsaturated fatty acid. Aside from that, if saturated fatty acid is they are solid at a room temperature, in unsaturated acid they are liquid. Again, in saturated acid they are solid at room temperature. When unsaturated fatty acid, they are liquid at room temperature. Have a low melting point. Okay, that is the differences of unsaturated to saturated. The commonly used system for designating the position of double bond in unsaturated fatty acid is a delta numbering system. Okay, what do you mean by the delta numbering system? Just for clarification of it. Okay, delta numbering system is actually defined as a carboxylic acid with a long aliphatic in either numbering scheme. Okay, that is actually a delta numbering system. Okay, an example of it, we have linoleic acid, oleic acid, and palmitoleic acid. Later part we will discuss further with this type of acids. In the naturally occurring unsaturated fatty acid, the double bond are in cis configuration and trans fatty acid. This particular explanation of unsaturated fatty acid is part of the structural form. Okay, produced by a fermentation in the rumen of dairy animals and are obtained from dairy products of a meat. Okay, when we say cis and trans, you can basically see the cis and trans structure in the structure of unsaturated. Okay. Actually, cis is an atoms or a group that lie on the same face of a molecule. Okay. And trans itself is, or the both prefix, which is cis and trans, are from Latin, or when we say cis, this side of, and when we say trans, the other side of. Okay, that is actually the definition of the cis and trans structure in the particular structure of unsaturated fatty acids. Cis will make into this side of, and trans the other side of. Again, when we say cis, it is actually an atom of group that lie on the same face of molecule in this side, and when we say trans, it is actually an atom group that lie on the same face of molecule to the other side of the formula or of the structure. Okay, and as I've said, there are types of unsaturated fatty acid based upon the number of double band present. Okay, when we say monounsaturated fatty acid, they contain only one bond per fatty acid. The double bond is between carbon, 9th carbon, and 10th carbon. Okay, basically in the branching of unsaturated fatty acid, you can actually put the monosaccharide double bond in the 9th carbon or in the 10th carbon. Okay, always remember that one, that you can basically put the double band of monounsaturated fatty acid in the 9th carbon and in the 10th carbon. Continually, polyunsaturated fatty acid, or it actually from the abbreviation PUFAS, they contain two or more double bands along the length of the hydrocarbon chain. PUFAS are also known as essential fatty acid. Example of it, we have linoleic and linolenic acid. Okay, so that is actually a polyunsaturated fatty acid. Okay, aside from that, polyunsaturated fatty acid is actually essential fatty acid that body needs for brain function and cell growth. Always remember that one. Aside from this function of it, or aside from this definition, polyunsaturated fatty acid are essential fatty acid that the body needs for brain function and cell growth. Okay, so that is polyunsaturated fatty acid. And before we will go on the differences between saturated and unsaturated fatty acid, let's answer this question: what is better, monounsaturated or polyunsaturated? Okay, this is actually explains that eating foods rich in monounsaturated fatty acid instead of saturated fats improves blood cholesterol levels, which can decrease your risk of heart disease and may also help decrease the risk of type 2 diabetes. Polyunsaturated fatty acid can actually divert all of the essential in when you eat a monounsaturated fatty acid, because as we all know, polyunsaturated fatty acid is essential in our body needs for brain function and cell growth. Okay, so that is actually the answer between what is better, it is monounsaturated or polyunsaturated. Okay, and it said that polyunsaturated is essential, which is actually basically needs in our brain and function and cell growth. Okay, now let's let's now know the differences between saturated fat and unsaturated fat. It said with this labeling that saturated fat are meats, butter, dairy products, solid at room temperature, increased levels of bad cholesterol, and a low density in lipoprotein clogs arteries. In contrast with that, it said that unsaturated fatty acid is composed of vegetable oils, liquid at room temperature, increased levels of good cholesterol, and high density lipoprotein, and escort it to the liver where LDL is broken down and eventually removed from the body. Okay, when we say LDL, it is actually a low density of lipoprotein. Okay, so that is actually basically the differences between saturated fat and unsaturated